You know what has to happen. You have to play Dicey Questions.
I'm so excited for this.
I will just say something you said off camera because round of applause for anyone who knows this is inspired by Jurassic Park, which is my favorite movie.
Astonished that people wouldn't know that this is inspired by Jurassic Park. It was one of my favorite movies growing up as well, although my Spielberg of choice is Hook.
I have so much respect for you right now. I feel like if it wasn't Jurassic, the Spielberg movie I watched the most growing up was probably Hook.
I think it's a perfect movie. They're both perfect movies.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I'd throw in Jaws and E.T. too.
Yeah.
That was the rotation when I was a kid. Solid choices. All right, so you get 3 rolls on the tower.
Okay.
Each number corresponds with a random question.
Okay.
And that is where our interview begins.
All right.
First roll.
Here we go. What's the matter? Roll the dice. 5.
All right. Oh, you got a big meaty question to start. This is one of my favorite acting questions. It's called favorite, least favorite. I want to know your single favorite part of the acting process. So, like meeting your co-stars, putting your costume on for the first time, something like that. But then I need the flip side as well. Not necessarily your least favorite, but a part of the process where you still see room to grow for yourself.
Well, my favorite doesn't always apply to film, but it always applies to theater. My favorite part of the acting process is rehearsal. I feel like it is it's often overlooked, especially when I was doing like broadcast television and Supergirl and Glee. Like rehearsal is really rushed sometimes because you don't always have time to spend to like play around, but I feel like that's where you get to fall on your face and make a fool of yourself and like try new things and really like get your sea legs before you actually do the thing. So rehearsal's my favorite part of the process. And I feel like you just get to know everybody. It's just like a really cozy thing for me. My least favorite or thing that I feel like I would like to improve on, that's a funny thing. I can't think of anything. I really love what I do.
I think that's a beautiful thing. And I feel like those lessons are things that like you're not prepared for and you wind up discovering along the way. That's like one of the most beautiful things about any art form for that matter. With each project, you hone more and more, whether you're aware of it or not. And I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Next roll on the tower.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to give it a little more chutzpah.
Okay, let's do it. All right, we got a 2. 2. This is inspired by Girls on the Bus.
Great.
Road trip snack. I need your top 3 snacks for a long road trip.
This is going to say a lot about me. It's all candy.
Okay. I'll take that.
Or sugar, I should say, because an icy is a must-have. If I'm at a convenience store that has like some type of iced slushed beverage, I'm getting it.
I get it.
Good and Plenty's.
Wow.
Which I know I am an outlier.
That's a choice.
It's either you love it or you hate it.
I won't agree with it, but I'll respect it.
And I think nowadays, actually, I'll detour from the sugar and I'll say that nowadays, I think more often than not on a long road trip, a cup of coffee, even if it's like a really bad, terrible gas station cup of coffee, I'm gonna get it.
Whenever I ask people questions like that, I always have to make sure to come up with my own answers, and I almost put coffee on my list, and I'm like, does that make me sound lame that I'm like my snack is coffee? But
no,
like,
I think it's
you
cool.
need it.
Yeah. Cup of coffee, it's just, there's something about it.
I'm already thinking about my drive down to San Diego for Comic-Con, and on the list for things I need, it's only 2 hours, it's not that long.
Yeah, but still.
The cup of coffee is like the most important thing.
Beverage.
Forget my suitcase, but the cup of coffee.
Yes, the beverage is important.
It's vital. It's vital. All right, one more roll on the tower.
Okay. That was a good one.
Ooh, wow, that was intense. I like it. Oh, you got the other Girls on the Bus question. This is road trip, buddy. I feel like you're going to be throwing some people under the bus with this one. No pun intended. You can pick one Girls on the Bus co-star to be your road trip buddy. I want to know the single person you would pick and why them.
It's so hard. It depends on where we're going, too.
Okay.
Like, that is so circumstantial. But I feel like if this is like a... Oh, because they'd all be like really great road trip buddies for very different reasons.
I was hesitant to put it on the list because they're all so lovely and that felt so mean, but
Can you tell me where we're going?
Just because this is fresh in my mind and I'm always happy here. You're going to Disney World. You're driving cross country to Disney World.
Natasha. because we are so silly together. She's my fellow silly goose. We're in the Silly Goose Club. All four of us are very silly, especially when we're together, but Natasha and I just giggle and we are really goofy together. And I feel like we would just like sing at the top of our lungs and she's such a free spirit. And then we'd get to Disney and she's so go with the flow. And it's very easy to get stressed at Disney.
That it is.
And she would not be that person.
Oh, I like those qualities. Whenever I go to Disney, I have to like latch on to a planner. I'm a planner in other places in life, but I latch on to someone who knows Disney well and is a planner. That way I put in no effort and all I have to do is follow them around.
Yes, that's smart.
That's the key.
Yeah,
that's
that
the
is the
secret to a successful day at Disney.
Yes.
Go with a bossy friend who is in control of the situation. What's up, everyone? Welcome back for a brand new edition of Collider Ladies Night. I have the pleasure of welcoming Melissa Benoist to the show for Girls on the Bus. I adore your show.
Thank you.
I love the show and the cast. The four of you together, it's just like pitch perfect.
I adore them too.
What is the movie you saw, personal experience you had, performance you saw, whatever it may be, that first made you say to yourself, I absolutely have to be an actor?
It's really hard to pinpoint that because it happened I just don't remember a time where I didn't. I started ballet and tap and jazz class really, really little, like 3 years old. Well, it actually might have even been before that. My dad, I remember when I was maybe 4 or 5, my parents got this like really intense stereo 5 CD, you know, the ones that we
I'm
used
well
to
aware of this.
revolve, and it had like the standing speakers, and it was in our living room that we'd never spent any time in because we weren't allowed to touch anything. And I remember my dad put on Bon Jovi, his CD, and I had a mullet at the time because it was 1990, whatever, early 90s.
You have painted the most like perfect picture here. I feel it. I feel like I'm there.
And we called it Bunny Bunny Day in our house for some reason. And I would put all my stuffed animals. They were my audience, and John Bon Jovi was the show, and I was dancing around and acting a fool. But I think that was like the clearest indication that I just always knew that this was what I wanted to do and who I was. And the first movie, we talked about it, Hook. That was the first movie I think I remember seeing in movie theaters, aside from like Disney movies back then, that just rocked my world. I was so swept away by it. I was terrified. I was like moved beyond, and I still like that movie just does something for me.
I get it. The abduction scene in that movie was terrible.
The children were screaming.
It was too good. But yes. And poor Maggie Smith just ripped my heart into it. And I grew up to be a big horror lover. Still to this day, when I watch that movie, there's something about that scene that like gets me all tense again.
I just got the chills thinking about it. Yep, I'm with you.
Impression just made my day. So you knew it was in you from the very beginning. When you decided you wanted to actually make it into a career, become a professional actor, what did you think was the first step to making that dream a reality? And now having done it, would you recommend that step to another aspiring actor?
What I thought was, well, to preface this answer, I never thought that TV and film was anything that was I never thought it was going to be attainable for me. It just felt like such a far-off dream. And I was always so enamored by it and like watched the Oscars every year and loved like the magic glamour of it. But I never thought that was going to be in my future. And stage and theater was my first love. I still love it. So New York, I knew I had to get myself there. And I went to college there, which I would recommend for any aspiring artist of any age, whether or not that you want to do TV, film, or theater. Just, it is a city that is so difficult for artists starting out, and it teaches you how to survive and how to believe in yourself and how to hustle, but it's so inspiring, and I found myself there as an adolescent. So yeah, I would recommend that.
I'm an NYUer.
You are?
I was very scared to like go to the big city and be off on my own.
I was
it's such a
too.
big place for the
Yeah.
first time.
Where
and,
did you go from?
from Long Island.
Oh,
it was
so
like in my
really far.
It was in my backyard.
But still.
But like being in
intimidating.
the Big Apple by myself was a little nerve-wracking, but oh god, I ate it up.
Me too.
I love that city, and then I refused to leave, and it was like a major like ripping the Band-Aid off to come out here, which I'm glad I finally did.
I felt the same way. It took me a really long time to warm up to Los Angeles.
Do you go back to New York to visit often?
I mean, we shot Girls on the Bus there. So yes, I try to go back, and I'm always like, maybe someday we'll go and maybe like relocate. And I would love to live there again, like on a longer
We'll
term
get
basis,
onto
but
your Broadway work, but like I feel like you gotta do another Broadway show.
I would, in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Whenever it makes sense. Right now I have a small child, so it's very hard. That's a really demanding schedule, and I'm really enjoying spending time with my son right now and like being there for bedtime. So theater doesn't always make sense for life, but yeah, it's always there in my heart.
I get that. When the time is right, I'm rooting for it. I have 2 follow-up questions about school. I love asking this question because some people know, like, school is so right for them, and then others, they'd rather go a different path, and that is perfectly fine, too. In the program that you studied in, can you tell me something you learned there that you still value and use to this day, but then also something that all the schooling in the world there never would have prepared you for when you hit your first professional set?
Something that I learned at the particular, I went to Marymount Manhattan College on the Upper East Side. I loved my experience there. It was such a small, tight-knit community in such a big city, and it was a really safe space to be introduced.
So valuable to have there.
To be introduced to New York and to like kind of cut my teeth there was really fantastic. I'm so grateful for that. And I think what the faculty there did really well, especially with the professors I was lucky enough to have, was to like show us that embracing ourselves is the key. And I had one professor in particular who sadly just passed away. His name was John Basil, and he was a professor of Shakespeare. He was brilliant and so supportive. And he actually pulled me aside. I did As You Like It with him, and I was Rosalind As You Like It, which was one of my most favorite roles I've ever played. He was like, you got this. Like, you got to just be you. And I know that sounds like such a simple sentiment, and we hear it all the time, and yes, it might be trite and corny, but it's so true for artists. Like, what you carry and what you bring to the world might not always feel like it's for everyone or at the right, like, it's timing and it's believing in yourself and never giving up. I sound so cheesy, but that's true.
It's true, and I mean, while there might be a cheesy quality to it, like, ultimately it is one of the toughest things to fully embrace and believe in, which is why it's cheesy, because it needs to be repeated over and over.
Exactly.
Because we all don't do it.
Yes, because it's very hard to do. It's so much easier said than done, but I thank goodness for people like John Basil, and that is a person being that's the true meaning of teaching to my mind, like showing people their potential. So that was really valuable. The thing that, well, first things first, I went to school for, my concentration was BFA in acting, but we learned absolutely nothing about how a set works. Like, I showed up on my first day on set, even when I had done like small guest star roles on all the shows that everyone in New York does, like Law and Order and all the things. But then when I got my first big job on Glee, I showed up on that set like not even knowing what a mark was. I didn't know where the cameras were or even know where to, like, clueless, completely clueless. And that is something I wish I had learned in college.
I get that. I'll often ask people, what is a seemingly silly question you had about what it takes to make a movie or show that you were afraid to ask when you were first starting out? And things like hitting your mark or knowing like what angle to look at the camera at. Like all those things seem so basic, but
Yes.
they're usually overlooked in programs and not taught with specificity, which makes it hard to wrap your head around if you're even aware of it at all. It's wild. It's wild. So the other question I had for you, because you also brought up that was a program for film and television. You went to that university preparing to study musical theater, though, right?
Yes, so it wasn't necessarily just for film and television. It was just an acting major. Like the general craft of acting.
So that school doesn't split them?
No. In fact, I don't even know. I'm sure they do offer classes for film and television, but primarily it was like with the intent of people who want to do theater for a living. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of programs that like mix disciplines, mix role. Like the film school I went to did producing, directing, and screenwriting. And for the first year, everybody had to do the same coursework.
That's so
valuable. So we all
valuable.
learned about everybody's job, and I think we were all better off for it.
Absolutely. And I feel this way even now, having worked for as long as I have. Like the more you know about how everyone's role and how many moving parts there are to just get one work or project up and running, the better off you are.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true, especially now that you're producing more.
Exactly.
It's so valuable. All right, you brought up Glee, so I'll jump to that next. And one thing I always love asking people about is their experience breaking out in Hollywood, because it looks one way from our vantage point. It probably feels completely different to you. So surprise, surprise, two-part question. Name a misconception about the reality of breaking out in Hollywood, but then also what is something that truly did change for the better because you got to be on Glee?
A misconception is that it is the glamour of it all, I think. And particularly in my experience, Glee was already so established. It was already a part of the zeitgeist. It had this aura about it. And I joined, and it was so much more difficult than I anticipated it being. And also the misconception that I'm a person that, I'll just say it, like fame is really scary to me.
I get it.
And that was overwhelming. It's overwhelming to like all of a sudden feel eyes on you. And I'm not just talking about like in day-to-day life. I mean like the awareness that people are watching you and watching your work. That was a feeling I didn't anticipate. And I've since gotten more used to it, but it was foreign back then. And overwhelming. Something that did change for the better was that I think I really slowly but surely started to like hone in on what I wanted to just tell in stories, and I just gained more confidence and self-awareness and adaptability, and that all happened on that first job.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm curious if I can connect the dots with what you just said this way. What is something you learned while working on Glee that maybe influenced your choice to join Supergirl as a series regular? And then I'll stop there and I'll ask my second part after.
I think what I learned on Glee was that I was a really hard worker, and that I could do really hard things. Because the schedule on that show was grueling. Because there were so many moving parts, and it was fun, but tough. We had to pre-record the songs, and I'm sure if you've had anyone else from the show on here, I'm sure they've said the same thing. You had to rehearse the dances, you had to pre-record the songs, then you had to film the songs, and filming the songs were a lot longer. They took like hours and hours and hours, and then you also had the scene work, and then I knew that Supergirl was going to carry a lot of pressure, and the responsibilities were going to be immense. And I think that my experience on Glee gave me the belief that I had the ability to carry Supergirl.
Okay, so the other half of my question was, is there anything you observed other actors who were maybe on Glee from day one, things that they did to set the tone on set that you kind of back-pocketed and then took to Supergirl when you were the headliner right from the start?
Immediately, I think of Kevin McHale. He just had the best vibe. He's funny. He's just got a great energy, was always cracking jokes, always singing. And that is so important on a set. Like, the vibe is everything, especially if you are the top of the call sheet. You set the tone. And Kevin wasn't the top of the call sheet on that show, but it was such an ensemble. He just knew how to set the tone. And I wonder if he knows that. I hope he hears this someday.
I'm going to have to clip this out and make sure to post it and tag. He should know that. Anybody who has that effect should know that and should be celebrated for it because it's important.
He was a sort of a leader, to me at least, and I think to a lot of the newcomers, because he also accepted us. And so, yeah, I think I back-pocketed that. And then when Supergirl came around, I'm not saying it was pretty and there were, like, some missteps. I wasn't always the best leader, but I certainly learned how to be one. And a lot of those aspects kind of were important to me.
They're so important. All right, I'm going to bring up future Supergirls now, but I know you've said it's not a situation where you would feel comfortable giving advice to new actors taking on that role, and I very much understand and respect that. But you did bring up the pressure, I think, of being on Glee earlier, but there is great pressure with taking on such an iconic role like Supergirl. Do you have any advice in terms of managing that, being able to deliver your best work while respecting the pressure that comes with a role like that, but also not letting it consume you?
That's a really good question. I think what always drove me working on that show was the audience and who I knew I was making the show for. And of course I know that she is an iconic character that spans many generations of fans, but the people that I was making that show for while we were making it were young women. And if I kept that in the forefront of my mind, it always made everything palatable.
Ugh, my heart. That makes all the sense in the world. I love it. All right, I wanted to make sure to touch on your Broadway experience before teetering into Girls on the Bus. It was 2018. You were in Beautiful. You made your Broadway debut. I'm curious, when you went into that and committed to being on Broadway, what did you think was going to be the single most difficult thing about doing a Broadway musical? And ultimately, did that wind up being the hardest part, or did something else catch you by surprise?
I knew it was going to be the live singing, and that did end up being the hardest part.
Why?
I hadn't done it in so long, and that's an instrument that you have to be so consistent at working at. I think for some people there are freaks of nature that it just is very easy for them. I think like Ariana Grande is one of those people, and this girl that my husband just worked with, Soleil Pfeiffer, she's one of those people that like they just open their mouths after not having slept and they sound like an angel. That's not my experience. I really have to work at it and warm up and be really kind to my voice and rest. And I knew that was daunting to me, and then it ended up being daunting because you're doing it 8 times a week. And I think I lost my voice at one point and had to go on prednisone. Like, it's hard to keep that up and to like keep the energy. So that ended up being exactly what was the hardest thing.
Is there any particular like tip or trick you came up with along the way to help you with that?
A lot of Grether's pastilles. They're these like throat lozenges for singers, and hot honey water.
Okay. It's that simple. Mm-hmm. I'm bad at drinking like tea and healthy things like honey water, so
and a really good warm-up, like a very good vocal warm-up is key.
All right, that is important. I can't sing, so I won't use any of this advice, but I appreciate you sharing it with the world. The next thing I was dying to ask you about is your production company, Three Things Productions. You launched in early 2021. I have so many questions about that. The first one is, I want to know what inspired the name.
Mary Oliver poem.
Oh, I see the connection now. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. So you make that production company. What is something that you hope to achieve with it? Maybe something that you wish was present on past sets you've worked on that now that you're in control in a producerial capacity, you could make sure that future actors have on your sets?
I mean, it also harkens back to what I feel like I learned working on Supergirl, is that a safe work environment, I mean in every regard, safe in the broader sense of the word, but also emotionally and artistically. I just want to be a part of making safe spaces for not just artists, but people who are the entire group. That is key to me, and I think that when you find that, you're able to really like dive in and excavate and find the stories that you really want to tell and tell them the most authentic way and truthfully when everyone is kind of simpatico in that way.
I love that. I didn't have this on my list, but this is a question that I love asking, and that made me remember it. Do you remember the very first time that you were able to feel the power of your own voice on a set, where you spoke up, you were heard, and something changed for the better?
The first time, it must have been, I'm sure it was on Supergirl. And there were a lot of instances. And partly that was because I was such a team player from the get-go that I did find myself in a lot of positions where I was like, wait, I don't know if I want to be doing this. But I told them I would. Because I didn't want to let anyone down. So I think maybe one of the first moments was, God, it's so simple. And this shows you how much of a yes man I was. It was that someone was trying to like do touch-ups on my hair and makeup, and I was trying to like focus, and I was having a really hard time doing it. And normally I would just let people touch me while I was getting into a space that I needed to be in, but this particular moment I needed a minute, and it was really hard for me to ask for that.
I get it, though. I get it.
Because that's essentially me telling someone like, can you please walk away for one moment? And I had to do that, and I was heard. And that sounds so rudimentary, but...
Well, it's one of the greatest challenges of being a collaborator in an artistic space. You need to make sure you could deliver your best work, but like you delivering your best work also impacts somebody else's work because that person was trying to get their job done. Yes. But the only way to serve the end product is if you make sure you practice like your self-care and what you need as well. Because that won't wind up doing their work justice.
And finding the line where you are able to do that and remain respectful, that was always really important to me. But there were other moments where that was, I think, the first time I can remember. But there were other moments that I really found my voice and was like, I'm not going to do that.
Is there anything in particular you could share?
I think a lot of times it was for physical, like stunt work. I ended up doing a lot of stunt work, and I had fantastic stunt women on the show, like incredible, the best in the business. But oftentimes I had to do a lot of it because they needed to see my face. And especially the wire work, it was so tough physically for my body, and I ended up getting injured at one point, and so I put my foot down on that a few times.
Understandable. It's an important thing to be able to do. Jumping into Girls on the Bus now. First, I want to ask you about kind of like finding who Sadie was. So I've gotten a little obsessed with this question because someone recently told me about the joys of starting a new show as an actor. And like you start and you're unsure, but then you have that moment where you do that scene and it's like, I have found who my character is. Did you have that moment with her? And if so, what scene was it?
I did, and it was a montage scene where it's in the first episode, and she's calling a bunch of sources to try to get the first interview with a presidential candidate. And it's just little snippets, but she's like relentless and shameless and asking people if they played pickleball with the candidate. And she's in the bathroom stall while other people are going to the bathroom. Like, it just so personified who she was, this like... especially when she had a goal and was trying to prove herself, this like shameless, like chaotic energy that was so pinpoint focused on one thing. That's where I felt like I found her.
Okay, I could definitely see that. To start to teeter into bringing in your co-stars here, can you give me an example of a time when a scene partner gave you just what you needed and it helped you find something in Sadie that maybe even you never realized was there at the start?
The first thing that comes to mind is a scene, I think it's in, I can't remember which episode it's in, but it's a scene with Carla, with Grace, Gordon Green, where they're I don't want to give any spoilers, but they're coordinating this story that they're working on together, and Grace wants to file the story, and Sadie's not ready, and she's saying, wait, let's not tell our editors yet, because this is important. And Carla's just the bomb.
Yeah. She is.
She's so incredible, and I felt this with her all the time, that she would just make choices that I never would have thought she was going to make. And we could be so present with each other that bouncing off of her just felt really natural. And I got so mad at her in this particular scene. And it was just a great meeting of the minds of these two really smart women who were equally valid in their points of view, kind of sparring. And that was a really fulfilling scene to shoot.
I love that. I always love giving past ladies' night guests their flowers. You've worked with some of the best. Some of my favorite guests on this show, I love them all dearly, but some of my favorites are Carla and Kyler.
Kyler.
I mean,
she's a good hang.
She is something else.
Yeah, she's a good hang.
Every answer is just filled with like so much hope and inspiration.
Yep.
They blow, both of them just absolutely blow my mind. Another co-star question I have for you, because one of my favorite things is how, there's a million ways to approach your work as an actor. There's so many different techniques and processes out there. I want you to tell me something about Natasha, Carla, and Christina that makes each one of them one of a kind.
I mean, they are all incredibly intelligent in their own regard. Carla is like the most soul, and you've met her, like it's soul like oozing out of her, and her life experiences have just made her this beautiful, expansive person. Natasha is similar in the way that what I think makes her singular is that I have never met a young person that is so self-assured and so at peace with who she is, has so accepted herself in a way that I didn't have when I was that age, and it's so admirable. And she's such a free spirit and just full of joy. And Christina, I am not joking when I tell you, she I think is an angel on earth. She's so intimidatingly smart. I mean, she went to Harvard for undergrad. She's then the kindest, most accepting, understanding, empathetic person you'll meet. Yeah. They're all can you tell that I love them?
I'm not surprised to hear any of this. From there, it was breaking my heart a little, because I think the four of you are so perfect together. We're not going to spoil anything, of course, because I want to urge everyone to go and experience the show. But season 1 ends on an epic cliffhanger, and I'm desperate for more. The show was canceled. Mm-hmm. Before I ask you any questions about that, the first one I have to start with for my roadmap here is, also because you're a producer on it, is the intention to shop it around anywhere else, or is it kind of closing the book on it?
I have no idea. I know that the team behind it is so passionate, and Amy Chozick, this is her baby. It was her story in essence, and her experience that we were modeling it after. So I'm not going to say never about anything, but I have no idea.
Okay. I understand. I'm just going to say, it should happen. I like to manifest things at this table.
Smart, thank you.
More so badly.
I accept that.
So badly.
I appreciate it.
So this is something we were talking about a little bit off camera, and it stresses me out every single time I hear cancellation news, because so many shows are canceled and so many movies don't do well at the box office. And one of my biggest fears is that the artists that made them wind up devaluing their own work because it didn't do well in those respects, which is just it should never happen in my mind.
I agree.
So what is the key to forging forward and never looking back at the show as less than because it ended after one season?
I consistently remind myself as heartbroken as I was that we weren't getting a season 2. The experience and the process of making the show, learning what I learned about producing, forging the friendships that I made with these women, and not just them, but with the crew. We had a fantastic crew, and with the other cast. The experience was so full of joy and so fulfilling to me that nothing's going to take away from that. So I just hang on to the joy.
Good. I hope every single person working in this industry has that same mentality because they should. I am also curious about finding closure with a character when I'm not sure if you were given any information about where things were heading for them in season 2, but do you find that you have to do, I guess, some extra work to close the book on Sadie's journey, even though it was ended before it was meant to end?
That's a really good question that I don't think I've ever thought of, and I don't know if I've ever really felt like I have closure with any of my characters.
I think that's actually a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, they become a piece of you. And I will certainly miss Sadie so much because I really fell in love with the subject matter, and I really fell in love with, like, learning more and more about campaign reporting and political journalism. And I did have, in essence, an idea of what they wanted to do for the next 2 seasons, where season 1 was primaries, season 2 would have been the general election, and season 3 would have been the White House. And it was exciting. And that, yes, I don't know if I'll get closure because I loved it so much, and also it's an election year, so it's kind of hard to escape.
Yeah. I really appreciated, as an outsider, the opportunity to learn more what those journalists go through to get their jobs done because, like, I sit there and I watch and read from home, but I don't really know the ins and outs of what it's like riding in a bus like that.
Yeah, I was the same. I had no idea what went into it.
I don't know if you'll reveal this to me, but because you just brought up the show structure, do you know who would have made it all the way to the White House?
Yes.
You won't tell me?
No.
Okay. That's fair.
I'll let Amy Chozick or Julie Plec tell you if you ever speak to them.
That is the right response to what I just asked. We will wind down Collider Ladies Night with the final question. It is my favorite question. I always warn people it tends to make them uncomfortable, but it's an important thing to think about. In this industry, people give each other awards. Great. We should keep doing that. Nobody says good job to themselves nearly enough. I want you to tell me something you did on Girls on the Bus that you know you'll always be able to look back on and say, I'm so incredibly proud of what I did there.
I'm so incredibly proud that I was a part of a group. We sort of talked about this off camera, but I really feel it. I'm so incredibly proud that I was able to be a part of a group of smart women, not just producing the show, writing a show about smart women, and playing in scenes where I felt like a smart woman. And a fully multidimensional, flawed, confused, like real living, breathing woman, surrounded by women that were all trying to do the same thing. I was really proud that we were able to have a really, like, somehow find a single goal that all of us really believed in.
As a viewer, those qualities shine through big time, and it was a big reason that I gravitated to and then ended up loving the show.
I'm so glad that it resonated.
Really, really, really did. I'm going to say thank you for being on Ladies Night. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished. Huge congratulations on Girls on the Bus, and congratulations on everything coming your way in the future. Ladies Night door is open anytime.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.